Well, hello, it's Dren here, here for another Ghost Notes and another short mix tip. Doing a few of these videos with just short little kind of focused mix tips for you. As I mentioned in other videos, I've taught some of this stuff at both UC Santa Cruz and their Games and Playable Media department. And then I also have taught it at the San Francisco Conservatory Music for a few years, teaching game audio, sound design, and especially a class in mixing virtual instruments, trying to get virtual instruments to sound in like they belong together in a variety of ways, and some mix tricks you can do with virtual instruments. We were working in the box a lot. Students all had laptops and whatnot, so this is one of the areas that we focused a lot on. And so I'm just giving you some tips that I've given to my students over the years that seem to have helped them. So today's tip is all about drums and EQ. What we've got here is I just did a quick little beat using this drum kit from the drum kit designer here in Logic, something really simple. What I found would happen a lot of the time was students wouldn't necessarily use the EQ correctly. I usually advocate for subtractive EQ when you're just getting started, so that if you don't like some sounds in the EQ spectrum that you're hearing, try and take them out before boosting any frequencies. Approaching your mixes with the subtractive EQ first mindset leads you to fewer problems. If you're always boosting, you're always boosting, you're always boosting, that means you're also boosting dBs somewhere in the mix. And the more you start doing that, the more your mix gets out of control, the faster it gets out of control. So if you can subtract first, I think that is generally helpful, especially for the young mixer who's just getting started doing this stuff. Here's the example I'm going to show. This is just from the drum kit, a straight MIDI beat. So the first thing I will do from that is I'll show you how I did this. This is pretty simple. So what I want to do is create a kick drum track and a snare track. So I want to separate them because I don't want to treat them the same way. So what I did first was I took all these snare beats and muted them. And then I can go to Logic, back to that MIDI track, and then just say bounce in place. So if I do that, I'll just call this kick, oops, spell it right. And it creates the kick drum pattern here. And then I can do the same. Here's a nice trick. If you just click over here, it highlights all those. And if I can click here on the C, it highlights all the C. And then you can mute those. So once you have that, then you can do the same thing. Bounce in place, I'll call this snare. And now you have your kick and drum are separated here. So this is the MIDI. This is what I just did. Here's the snare. And that's the kick. Now I have done this already before, so I guess I'll just play you the ones that I did before. So just wanted to show you how to separate those. So we separate them first, and now we've got our kick and our snare. Now after listening for a while, maybe the mixer decides that snare is a little too deep, a little too dark. I want some brightness. So what I often see is we go to the EQ. Oh, let's go to the high frequencies and blast those up. So you get something like this. Take that off. So not necessarily an improvement. In fact, when you start doing a lot of these boosting of frequencies, things get out of control pretty quickly. So I think the first move is not to boost something that might not be there. Could be that this is just a snare with a different voicing that doesn't sound good when you boost up those higher frequencies. So what I usually advocate for is so I took the same snare pattern, I just copied that, and then decided to add a new MIDI track with a different snare. So I went to battery, and I grabbed this snare drum. And as you can hear, it's a much higher frequency in the snare drum. So originally we had this snare. Now if I blend them together, we get that high frequency that we wanted, but without affecting the original drum. It's fine to layer things, especially if they're different frequencies. So maybe we just want to blend those together and just barely bring in that brighter snare sound. just without it. Bring it in a little. And maybe that's all we need. That makes a big difference. But if you do what we were looking at before with the EQ, you start bringing up all these other frequencies as well. Now you've got a boost here of, what is that, 5 or 6 dBs at 800. Maybe you didn't want that. I mean, yeah, you could change the Q here and make that smaller, but then it starts sounding a little less realistic and a little worse. So you don't necessarily want to make those Qs really, really skinny, because it starts sounding really skinny and bad. So add a layer of something that sounds a little different, and maybe you're going to get what you want. So this is just an introduction to this idea. I think you can go a lot further with layering similar instruments to get the EQ bump that you want out of that instrument. Okay, so there's a little mix tip on layering instruments to try and get you what you might want to do with EQ, but getting it in a different way. Just adding more granular control to your mix can only help serve you to wrap your head around everything and take control over your mix. So rather than just bumping up that EQ, maybe think about layering a different sound on top that might give you what you're looking for. I hope that's helpful, and we'll see you next time. All right, thanks.